What's up, everyone? Happy Monday. How are we all doing? I am joined today with Noseman and Chad. How's it going, guys?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I hope everyone else is good and ready for the final part of this toon style series. So before we get into what we're going to be doing, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping and then we can get right into it. So if I just share my screen over here, I can talk a little bit about the events that we have coming up. So as I said, this is the final week. This is part 4 of our toon style motion graphics. And that means that next Monday, we're starting a brand new series, and that's going to be compositing with AOVs. And so this is a topic I get asked about a lot, actually, and it's something I'm not very familiar with. So I'm definitely excited for this series. And it's going to be Lionel VC Domine as a master trainer who'll be going through some basic to advanced compositing techniques. So if you fancy that, then definitely check that out. And we also have 2 Ask the Trainers. So we've got 2 Ask Me Anythings happening. And so I know, Noseman, you always ask people to send you their questions, send them to the team. And so that's going to be the plan for February 1st. I know it's you and Jonas will be doing an Ask Me Anything. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually going to be with you on this one because Jonas is on vacation. So he's asked me to step in. So I get to annoy you on that stream.
Or I can ask you some questions.
Oh, or we could do that too. I can't promise to know the answers though.
No, I'm just going to ask the questions. That's the point. Answer.
Cool. Also, just a reminder, we're actually streaming across, I believe, 3 different channels. The Maxon training team, the main Maxon YouTube channel, and also the Maxon Red Giant channels. But the recordings will be posted on the main Maxon training team YouTube channel. So this one here. So you can see all the live streams we have coming up, including the recordings to all the videos are also timestamped, thanks to Dr. Sassy. So always love to shout him out. And if you fancy learning something new...
Oh, sorry. Sharon just said audio is very low. Am I coming through well?
You sound okay to me.
You sound a little quiet to me.
Oh, quiet. That's interesting because all my settings are exactly the same. Hopefully it's... I'm going to check the mic. Go on, Ellie. I'm going to see if it's this way.
Okay. So if you fancy learning something new, you can head over to Cinevacity, where we have a bunch of great Getting Started series, as well as loads of other YouTube tutorials on there. And then if you would like to get certified, you can actually head over to the certification page on the Maxon website, and you can check out the knowledge test, as well as a link to all of the topics as well. If you want to learn something new, then you can definitely check that. Some of them are actually linking now to YouTube tutorials. So if there is a topic on there that you're not familiar with and it links to a tutorial, then you can learn it straight away. Also, we do like to say thank you for being part of our community. Thank you for watching our live streams. We really appreciate it, especially those of you that watch them live. And so if you click the link that should now be in the chat, this is for the merch store. All you have to do is enter the passcode, which I believe is Toonie Graphics for this month. And you can grab yourselves a t-shirt. All you have to do is pay for shipping. Cool. Right. So yeah, just to get into what we're going to be doing today, between the 2, possibly 3 of us, we have a few different techniques to show. And the main theme throughout the entire month has been toon style motion graphics. And so I'm going to show a little bit of a technique looking at stylized lightning, and then also how we can create some sketchy outlines as well. So you sort of like those hand-drawn rough outlines. And the way that we're going to create these is we're going to be diving into some spline modifiers. And so I just want to really quickly talk about capsules inside of Cinema 4D or inside of the asset browser. And so these are all of the assets that you find in the asset browser. So these can be all these, like the scene nodes, the models, the shaders, materials, all of those presets that help you just get going as an artist or as anyone that works in the Maxon tools. And so these can be found, as I said, in the asset browser, and we update them every single month. And that's what we refer to as capsules, what you might refer to as assets. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, how we can use some of these to create these really interesting effects. Because especially some of the spline modifiers, you can do really cool things and work out some deformation. And it's kind of like having a brand new tool and feature, but it's an asset or a capsule. So that's kind of what I'm going to show. So I'm going to kick this off. As always, if you have any questions, then just let us know. Also, I've seen Rocket Lasso is in the chat. Yes, I'm talking about the electric spline modifier. So Chris Schmidt and his team, which I believe is his brother, create these amazing assets.
We all are talking about these.
I can always talk about Chris. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the plan is I'm going to show you 3 different modifiers, and I'm going to show you how we can then combine them to create some kind of cool stylized lightning effect. And the thing is, I've not played too much with these. And so the idea is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about them. We're just going to have a little play. And then the idea is you can go back and you can just start to explore with these really incredible tools that we can find. So inside of the asset browser, so let me just delete that so you can see sort of what you would normally see here. We can search Spline Modifier, and then under the nodes or under the operators, we can then see all the different modifiers here. So let me actually just go search that. Here we go. So we have a few different spline modifiers, and what these are going to do, these are going to work as deformers on our splines. And so we're going to talk about electric spline, branch spline, and then trim spline, and then we're going to combine them all together. So I'm going to start with my personal favorite, which is the electric spline modifier. So all we do is we double click it and it opens up and it adds itself kind of like an object into our objects manager. So think of these as just extra features and extra tools. They're just not in your toolbars. They're not in your menus. They're in your asset browser. And the way this works is we need to connect it to the spline that we want to deform or we want it to affect. And so if I just drag and drop, make it a child of my spline, hopefully we can now see. So what I did, I made my spline thickness bigger as well, just so for the sakes of the stream. So hopefully everyone can see this nice and clearly. And so what we've got, we've now deformed this spline based on the attributes in our electric spline modifier. And it's also automatically animated. So straight away, as I press play, we can now see we have this like crazy electric spline going on. So let's have a little look. We won't go through every single setting, but we'll look at some of the ones that I think are going to be important for when it comes to stylized lightning. So the first thing here is we have this step value, and this is subdividing our spline based on this value. So we can see here we have quite a lot of deformation going on and a lot of subdivisions because we have a low value. If we increase this value, we can see how we almost get what I would call like a low res version. We have a lower subdivided version of this. And then we have our displacement scale. So we can control our displacement size, just like we would in any kind of displacer. But we also have relative scale. So we can now control this based on our X, Y, and Z axes. And so if we're thinking about toon and we're thinking about 2D, we could maybe come in and we could reduce the scale on the Z-axis. So now we have something like this, looking a little bit more like a 2D lightning bolt. We then have, as we often see in Cinema 4D, a random seed value. So we can just play around and find one that we think looks cool for what we're creating. And then probably one of the best settings that you're going to want to play with is the noise type. So if anyone's worked in Cinema 4D or in the Maxon tools, you'll know Maxon noises are extremely powerful. We can use them in redshift materials. We can use them, in displacement. We can use them in a variety of different things. And we can also use them here. So we can play around and we can choose the noise types that we like. And then we can control the noise frequency as well as the octaves. So now we've just created this really kind of interesting looking result. And that's really just by changing a few of these settings. And it's all things that we're familiar with when we work in C4D. We could even control our animation speed as well as a loop period. And the rest of the stuff I'm going to talk about in the next scene. But for now, That is the electric spline modifier. The next one is going to be the branch spline modifier. So again, I'm just going to double click that, and it's going to open in here, and we can just drag and drop that as a child of our second spline. So it kind of does what you might imagine it does. It adds branches onto the parts of my original spline. So we have these new branches, these new splines coming off of our original spline here. Then we have a few settings inside of here where we can control the branch count. So we can reduce this or we can increase this if we want to. We can have the placement based on a variety of different options. So length, we can have count, the percentage, and then we can play around with our min and max branches as well as a spread value. We can also define the placement. So the start of our spline is going to be the top here, and the end is going to be this bottom part. So if I want them to be more into the middle of my spline, I could increase my start value and decrease my end value, and we can now see we've pulled them into there. And then again, we have this nice variation option. And then finally, we have the option to control the length and the length variation of our branches. So with this, the initial thing I thought of when I first started playing around with these modifiers ready for this stream was, okay, I love this, but immediately I want more branches on my branches. And so I was thinking, okay, how can we do that? And well, there is actually a way that you can branch off the branches. And we can do that by just adding a second branch spline modifier. And then let's maybe just reduce this down. And let's reduce this down just so we can see sort of what's going on. So now what we have is we have branches coming off of our original ones. And if I just control the placement, we can see that far better. So let's sort of move around here. So we can see we now have these coming off. We've got our main spline, which is this one straight down the middle. We then have our first spline modifier, our branch spline modifier, creating these first ones, and then we have our next creating these secondary ones as well. And so that was something I knew I immediately wanted to do. So I'm really glad that you're able to just duplicate these up, and it works in a really great way. And finally, we have the trim spline modifier. So if I just double click, add this to my third spline, we don't have too much going on here. What we can do is we can trim our spline from a certain point. So we can go control our start and our end. But where this becomes really cool is when we begin to apply some offset percentages and variations. So if I just add an offset, we can see kind of what's happening. We're now getting this section here, but we're getting the different offset value. And then we can add rate, which is going to be an animation speed, and it's going to go through that offset. So if I just put like, I don't know, 50% or something, and then I press play, we can now see we're getting a loop period of this based on it's going through our offset. And then what we can do, we can even do a custom value, and then we can clamp these min and these max values. So let's see if I can actually get some out of this. And so we can see we're just getting that there. And let's maybe go a bit down. Give me some animation. So this is what happens when you play around with things live. Let's maybe do a rate of 90%. This is a story of my streams, really, isn't it? Here we go. So we can see we're getting that. Maybe if I just reduce that, we can see that a little bit better. We can now see we're able to create this kind of animation based on the trimmed spline. And so the cool stuff about all of these is we can actually then combine them all together to create really interesting results. And so let's do that. So let's just go, let's make a whole new scene. And just a few things I like to do. Turn my wet plane off, and then let's get some large icons so we can see them. Cool, so let's create our lightning bolt. Again, super easy, end side with two sides, and then we're going to rotate this 90 degrees like that. Beautiful, this is our lovely lightning bolt. let's just custom change the color. Perfect, right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to now combine all of these modifiers together in a certain way and create a stylized lightning effect. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to take the branch spline modifier, because the idea is we kind of want to work backwards. And so I want to create the entire shape, so the entire look of the lightning bolt style spline. And then I want to use the trim spline to animate and break it apart. And then I want to use the electric spline to really add that finishing touch of making it look like lightning or electricity. So branch spline modifier. I'm just going to title this 1 because we're going to end up with 3 of them. And we're just going to reduce the count. And then we maybe just want to pull these in, or pull this top one down just a little bit, and then have them slightly longer. So these are going to be like the forks that are coming off of our lightning bolt. At the moment, it kind of looks like a stick man with no head, but we'll go for it. And let's add our second modifier. Just place this underneath this one. So we're now getting these, as we saw in the previous scene, they're now branching off of our original branches. And with these again, we just want to have a low count. And then we're going to go to relative length this time. And then let's just enter some percentage values. Cool. So we've got some forks coming off that are just varying in length. And then finally, let's just add another one. And then with this one, we'll go back to absolute, and we're just going to reduce this down a little bit. So this is the shape that we're starting with. And you're probably thinking, Ellie, it looks nothing like lightning. And I'd agree with you. But the idea is it's about creating those different elements, because now when we add the trim spline modifier, it's going to animate through our different branches, and it will give the impression that it's sort of those little bits of lightning that are coming off. So now let's grab our trim spline modifier. And again, I'm just going to place that just underneath. And so let's just reduce this sizing a little bit. And then in our offset, these are the values that I found after playing around. You kind of get an idea of what works for the things that you're creating. And so now if I just play this through, so what we've done is we've reduced that here. And now we can press play. And this is the animation we've been able to create purely by using that trim spline modifier. So we've controlled the start and end. We've just pulled those in a little bit. And then we've adjusted our offset as well as our clamp. And so now it is animating through those different parts. And we're kind of getting a little bit closer. But again, the thing that really makes this work is the electric spline modifier. So the final thing we want to do is we're just going to add this one onto the bottom. And so we can now see we're starting to get that electricity effect, but we want more of a lightning style. So let's just increase our step so we get less of the electricity and more of the sort of the lightning style. We can then reduce our displacement. So it doesn't need to be too heavy. And then everything to me is probably okay as the default. And this is what we've created. Let's maybe go 45 frames. In the right setting, Ellie, would be cool. Here we go. So this is the lightning that we've been able to create purely by just taking a single spline and then adding our different modifiers and just changing a few different settings, really. I mean, a lot of it is sort of the default settings and then just sort of tweaking those to create this lightning style effect. And it's these bits here that I struggled to get originally. And it was with the additional branch spline modifiers and the trim spline is how you can then get those just additional like forks that I think help sell this a little better. Okay, do we have any questions on this before I get to how we would then render this?
There are some. First of all, am I audible? Nicely audible. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're sounding good.
Because I changed the cable here and I'm full of cables. But yeah, there haven't. Some questions have been addressed by Chris Rocket Lasso himself. So nothing yet for you, Ellie. Thank you.
Cool. And he can definitely answer them far better than I can. All right, cool. So let's look at how we can render this. So first of all, yes, we could convert this into geometry if we want to, but with Redshift, what we can do is we can render these at render time using an object tag. So let's just set up a few things. Let's set up my comp to be just 1500 by 1500. And then in Redshift, I'm just going to reduce my progressive passes down. We don't need 1024 passes. And let's get that in there. Okay, cool. So actually, you know what? First of all, let me just get a few more of these. Let's drop it into a cloner. Let's set that to linear, move that over, and then I'm going to be lazy. And instead of doing variation, I'm just going to rotate them slightly so they look different. And this is what we got, our lightning bolt. So we press play, and of course, we don't see anything in our render view. And that's because splines don't render. We don't have geometry. What we can do is we can add a Redshift object tag onto our spline. So we can just RS, and we go RS object tag. And it's clever enough to know that it's actually on a spline. And so then it gives us this curve option. And this curve option allows us to render our splines as a particular mode. So we could go like hair strands, and we can now see in my render view, we're now starting to see our stylized lightning bolt. What I think looks cool is cones gives us this really sort of like this thick and then this thin area, which yes, we could create with our scale graph if we want, but I like the quick version of using cones. And I just increase that thickness there so we can see those a little bit better. Cool, so now we just want to add a light material. So inside of Redshift, we have an incandescent, and we can drop that on here. And I'm just going to change this to be what I think the lightning would look like in my cartoon. And that's going to be just a bright yellow with a little bit more of an intensity value. And finally, the last thing that we want to do is we can add a camera, and inside the camera itself, we have lens effects. And adding a glow to this is really going to help sell it just a little bit better. So bloom is glow, and we can just put that to override. So we're inside of our camera. You can do this inside of the render settings if you want to, but I like to do it just inside of the camera because then I can have different post effects on some cameras, and it kind of works like that. And I can just reduce down my threshold and maybe increase my intensity. And then we have, I don't know how well this is going to play through the stream, but we'll see. I'm going to play this through. And then hopefully we can see how this works. I might even just come through. So this is what we had. This is what we've created quite easily and quite quickly just by combining these really cool spline modifiers. And then this at render time will be so fast because splines render like that. So this is another selling point for kind of working this way. Yeah, working with splines and the Redshift object tag, everything will render like really, really fast, which is good. So that was the first technique using the modifiers. If we don't have any questions, which I'm guessing with Chris in the chat, we're probably all good, I can move on to a second effect, which is creating some rough sketchy outlines, again, just by using the electric spline modifier. So we'll do this really quickly and really easy just by using a cube. We have some simple geometry here. Let's just sort of move that to there. And what we want to do is, again, because we're looking at spline modifiers, we need to create a spline where we would want our rough outlines. So imagine you had your notepad and you had your pen and you were drawing sort of like a rougher version of this cube. You'd have the lines overlapping, going over each other and not being too neat. That's the style aesthetic we're going to create. And also shout out Jonas, because this is his technique. He told me about it and I get the pleasure of then showing it online. So we need to grab the edges of this cube. And so in order to do that, we need to make it editable. So we can hit our C key, and then in edge mode, we can just go, when we select one, we go Command A, and it will then select all of our edges. And we can convert this edge selection into a spline. And the spline we can add the modifier to. So let's go to Mesh, Edge to Spline. And now let's just, we've got that. We can see we've got our spline now. So we've got our main cube. And we've got our spline. We can then come into our asset browser. We can grab our electric spline modifier. And we can make that a child of our spline. Okay, so let's reduce a few of these settings. So let's pull our displacement down, because we're thinking about those rough sketchy lines. We're not really thinking about creating electricity. We also want to reduce the animation speed. So we don't want them to be animated, because we're going to use a second electric spline modifier to create the additional jitter. And then let's just pull up the frequency. Oh, sorry, let's pull down the octaves. There we go. So now we can see we have these rough sketchy lines. But what I really love is when we come down to this modify option, we're able to pivot from a percentage. And so you can now see we're getting some of these edge breaks. And then we can also duplicate the spline by using a clone count value. So at the moment we can see we have one, so we have one of each line, but we can actually just increase this. And now we're starting to get that overlapping rough sketch line effect. So let's then add a little bit of animation, because at the moment when we press play, we don't have that additional jitter, if that's something you're after. So we can just add a second electric spline modifier. Again, just put that in.
Hey, Ellie?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? And just for clarification, like, why didn't you use I missed that. Why didn't you use the animation in the first electric spline modifier?
So,
or did you not get to that yet? Am I spoiling you something?
No. So no, it's a good question. Yeah. So you can do that. So you could just set the animation speed inside of here, but bear in mind, all of this is then still based on these values. So let's say I've got quite a high, I've got a low step value and I say high-ish displacement. So if I do an animation speed of 100% and we see how that moves, in my head, if I think, oh, okay, the step is now too low or the displacement's too high, I can use the second electric spline modifier with the correct settings to then do the animation. Whereas
so it's
here
using
I'm using to create the outlines.
Okay, gotcha.
So the values here are to make these outlines look the way that they do. And so then my animation may not need these settings. It might need a different type of settings to create more of a slow jitter, as opposed to an entire kind of animation based on these. So it's a little bit of just like a trick to animate based on different settings.
Right. So the first one, if I'm understanding you correctly, the first one is basically just like getting your lines, the look of the lines. And the second one is just about animating those lines. And so you have different properties for each of those things. Yeah.
So it's not a necessity. Like, it's not a necessity. You could absolutely just do it this way if you just want to have the one and animate it that way. But if you then find it's not animating how you like, you could then use this method to then be like, okay, this creates the outlines and I like how the outlines look. And now this one is now working to animate those, and I can then define that animation and those properties that way.
Cool. Brilliant. Sorry, I missed that. Thank you for the explanation. That's awesome.
No, you are all good. Thank you for the question. Cool. So yeah, let's just put this in there. And now we can just play around with some of these settings. So again, I'm going to go really low with the displacement. And then I'm also just going to change the octaves a little bit. And so this will just give an extra little jitter and shake. So we can see how that's different to when we did the animation speed in the other one. We're getting a more defined, just sort of shakiness happening as opposed to an all-round animation. And then let's bring in our render view and just switch on a few of these. Let's just turn that back on. And let's turn on, all I've got in here is a simple area light, and then a dome light. So let's just switch those on. And this is what we've created. And again, we need to use that trick where we can render those lines by using the redshift object tag. And let's just add some hair strands. And I've just got a plain material here with no base color. And so we can throw that on there. And now we've created those lines, and we can come in and we can just play around with the thickness a little bit more. And then here you can control the scale. So if I just add a point, if I command click and pull this down, you can see how we're getting varying thickness values. And so we could just sort of make a few points and just kind of play around a little bit with this thickness value just to get some varying values here. And it's just a nice, cool way of creating these toony, sketchy outlines based off of your geometry. It's kind of important to say, like disclaimer here, as you can kind of imagine, having really high resolution objects may not really give you a nice outcome. But if you're working with sort of slightly simpler shapes or text, then or a logo, then it's definitely going to be a cool trick. Cool. So those were like sort of the two things that I wanted to talk about, just to highlight these spline modifiers. In case you didn't know about them, now you do. So yeah, also shout out Chris in the chat and Rocket Lasso for making these incredible tools that we get to highlight and talk about on streams. If there's no questions, I mean, I'm having a little look through. I can hand over to you, Thanasis, if you have some stuff you want to show.
No, you
well,
have
actually. There's a quick question. Yes, so branch spline modifier is Cinema 4D 2024 at least. Electric spline modifier is 2023.2, I want to say. So
That's
you do need those versions.
It's outside my knowledge base. Yeah, I always work with the last version. So.
Wow.
Yeah, and by the way, I do have a couple of things to show to expand.
I know you always have a couple of things to show.
Yeah, just half of them I just made up when you were talking. So I apologize about that. So yeah, let me steal the screen from you.
Yeah,
I've got a cloud. I'm going to show a cloud. I'm going to show what else I'm going to show. I'm going to show lightning with MoGraph, and of course, everything's going to feature the electric spline modifier, which is I don't know. I think that you can use that in a gazillion contexts besides making electricity or lightning bolts and all that. And I would say it's just fun to play with. Just put the electric spline modifier if you want to pretend you're working for a whole day and just add splines and add it and play with the parameters. So yeah, and I've watched the evolution of all these tools that Chris and his team are making, and they're absolutely beautiful. Great value for the product. If anything else, you pay for these and you get Cinema 4D and everything else for free. How's that for a deal? So let's start with a simple thing, because everything that Ellie showed starts with a spline, okay? So I'm going to show you a couple of techniques for you to generate splines, upon which then you can apply the electric spline or anything else, all those amazing Rocket Lasso tools, and make great stuff. So my very dear friend Sharon asked about the easiest way to make a straight line. If anyone missed it, you just make an n side and you set it to 2 sides and you have a straight line. That's it. This doesn't create a looping spline. It creates an open spline with just 2 points. If you make it editable, you will see it only has 2 points, one here and one here. And the default is adaptive, which means there are no in-between points. But in any case, what you could do with a spline like this, just because nobody asked, and I will say it anyway, is use some sort of deformer. A plane effector would do, or actually, I'm not going to do a plane effector. I'm actually going to do a random effector and set it to points. And you can see that if you go to the random effector now and set this to an animated noise, like a turbulence, it only moves the 2 points. If you want this to have intermediate points, adaptive won't work for you because this is a straight line and there's no adaptivity to be added to this. Adaptive only adds to curved lines, but you can say uniform. And there you have some quasi electric thing where everything moves around. But in any case, this will be a procedural setup for you to create some sort of spline, and you can use any of the effectors and fields in order to do so. Now, having I'm going to touch upon that in this example here, but for now, I'm going to remove this and give you an option to create something like, I have this dude here that is running and gets hit by lightning and jumps, hit by lightning and jumps, and that. So the question is, what's an easy way to create an initial spline that points from some point in space to another point in space? And then you go and add one of the magnificent rocket lasso tools and make it fantastic. And that's so simple, it's silly simple. You make a null and you make it into a sphere. And the reason I'm making it into a sphere is because I need to add a bit more blah blah to what I'm doing, because it's so simple, it will take me 30 seconds. And as you realize, I cannot just speak for 30 seconds. This is a very good example of me doing that. Let's call this start. And let's make another one and call it end. And all you need to do is go to the MoGraph menu, bring up a tracer, drag these two things. One is already added because I had only one selected, but I can drag the start here now. And you just change this to connect all objects. And it will connect the first one to the second one to the third one to the fourth one and so forth, only to create this spline. The great thing about this is that I can move these around. I can add some sort of animation of vibrate with a certain frequency and a certain amplitude and do the same. Copy it over here and just go and change the seed. And this will create 2 animations. So, and you can always hand animate these too. You can use any mechanism of control you want. But the tracer now, it's a spline, which means that you can go and add the electric spline modifier. And now you have a lightning bolt that not only looks good, but you can control where it starts and where it ends. So this will be an interesting way for you to create an animation like this, where you have the origin, which is just a randomly animating null. I've got, again, the vibrate expression. And the second null, I've put it somewhere where the puppet is. I don't even remember where it is. It's down here where the feet are, over there. Oh, I'm using the male puppet character null for this. And the tracer is just connecting these two things. The only thing I did is go and create keyframes for the activation of the tracer. So that's the only thing you need to activate. And the other things are moving randomly. And just turn it on and off, add a couple of keyframes, one for on, one for off. And then you have this very, very specific moving thunderbolt that lights up in various positions. And if you use, if you go to your timeline and you use over here, we can press H here. Oh, where is my activation? Let's go basic. Let's drag the enabled in here. Oh, it doesn't show the keyframes. Duh. Enabled H. Anyhow, you won't see it here, but you will see it down here. And that is fine, or you can see it over here. And yeah, you just copy these at different time intervals, and you'll have more of these lightning strikes just popping up. I'm pressing Control and dragging. So now we're going to get quite a few zap, 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 and zap, and zap. You just create the zap once, off, on, off, and there you go. And if anyone didn't know, you go to the basic tab of any object and you can enable or disable if it's a generator or a spline. Now, and yeah, you can do quite a few of these effects. Now let's talk about the matrix. And what I did here is let's apply the tracer principle on something, because the electric spline modifier does a fantastic job of making any spline look like electricity, right? We know that already. But what if I want to have some sort of quasi-control? I want to have a spline that looks like this. It moves in a certain way, it has a certain pattern, and then I want to turn this into electricity, right? By adding it. So now I have the electric spline modifier is not applying any animation to this at all. So I want to combine these two things. Well, instead of two nulls and the tracer technique, what you could do is you can create a matrix in linear mode. And I'm going to go downwards. So I'm going to go to -50 or something like that. But I'm going to set the mode not to be per step, because now it's going to add 50, every 50 centimeters in the Y, it's going to add one of my matrices. And what I'm going to do is go endpoint. So I want the first one to be at 0, 0, and the last one to be at minus, let's say, 200. And in between, I want to add all these points. Now, this is 200 under the floor. I've got certain OCD issues. I need to do that. So I apologize, but not really. And now I want to move this around. So the easiest way is, again, you can use a random effector. And you can randomize the positions. You can randomize in a direction. Let's not move them in the Y. And if you press play, nothing happens, because the default randomization for the random effector is a standard random number that will only change if you change a seed. I want to use an animated randomization of the turbulence and the noise. I think this is a bit smoother. The turbulence is quite good. Now, if you want to tame it down a bit, the animation speed is one way to go, and the scale is another way to go. You can see the smaller it becomes, the more jittery it becomes. Whereas if you make this higher, it will become a bit more detailed. Sorry, a bit more smooth. So there we go. We have this basic animation. And what the great thing about this is, because it's a MoGraph object, you can go to the effector you're using and use a random, and let's say the -y. And what I'm going to do here is place it pretty much between the two edges, the top and the bottom, and always select the random field to get that little orange dot. And what I'm going to do to the random field now, because the top is moving, the bottom is not, because it's constrained by its position, and here the value of the field is 0. I want to make the two edges of the field 0 and just maximize down here on these points. So go to the remapping of the particular field and change the contour mode to a curve. And now I want, right in the middle, I'm going to press Control and drag this up here to approximately 1 and put this down here. So now what I'm doing is I'm applying this linear field goes 0, then here goes approximately 1 or something like that around here. You don't need to be very accurate. And then 0 again. So I'm getting a tapered application of my random effector, which I can go and expand now and do all sorts of fancy things with that. And this is what I get. And let's turn this into a spline. Select the matrix, go here, add a tracer object, and connect all objects. And there you go. You can turn off the matrix if it's irritating you, and you can turn off the random effector, everything else. So now we have this initial spline, which can be controlled, its position and all that, not only in terms of the linear field, but you can go and add all sorts of other fields here to make it go in very specific places. You can even add more than one matrices, one that starts here and finishes here, another one that starts here, finishes here, and so forth. So you can have control over the start and finish of each one. And all you have to do, go to the tracer and add, again, one of these fantastic tools, which, and look at that. So we have this hybrid where partially the animation of the general shape is controlled by a MoGraph setup and a tracer, and the secondary effect that makes it look like electricity. And I'm pretty sure, I haven't tried this. There you go. So this now is becoming extremely interesting. And sorry, if you want to have even more control over this, you can add more of these traces, more of these matrices, and create extremely, extremely complex and controllable electricity bolts and stuff like that. So, excuse me. So, do we have any questions up to this point? Anything? His voice is
not
Abracadabra.
At the moment, no.
Okay.
Everyone's just amazed.
Well, let me see. We do have a question from Yagnesh. Can you show us a small drawing character using a spline modifier? Small drawing character using a spline modifier. If you can be a bit more specific, unless
I think it might be, potentially like a stick figure, like character drawing, maybe animated with a spline modifier. That's my interpretation.
Okay. Well, if you do create a character, all right. Let's see. I'm gonna, it's never good to try new things when you're live, but hey,
It's the best way.
it's the best way. So I'm going to my
We love it
in
live.
character, and I'm gonna add a character object. Okay. So advanced biped. Let's go for the standard biped. So just a biped. Root, spline, control arm, spine, control leg. Okay. Now, let's see if I go and animate and add a walk cycle to this. So this character is walking now, whether you like it or not. What you could do is find these controllers and use, all right, let's do that. So let me go to the character and change the display. What you're seeing here is what the display menu, the display attributes allow you to see. So now we're seeing the controllers. And I think the controllers are good enough. So let me see if I can make this work. If I don't, I'm just going to stop it. So I'm going to take a tracer object, and I'm going to go here and pick this foot, then this, and then this. And I'm going to go and say, let's connect all objects. So what do we have here? And I'm going to make sure not to use vertices. So I have these two lines. And that tracer now, you can always go and apply the electric spline modifier. So Chris actually can tell me where, and I watched some tutorials that were in the making. Start, end. How do I fix? Oh, I can't fix the top. I think that there could be a start and end of the spline. So I did fail. I need to use two traces. One is going to go from the hip, from the torso to one leg. So let me turn this on and off. So the tracer goes from, oh, I don't want the tracer in here. I'm getting a feedback loop. So I have one leg. Then I'm going to get another leg, which is not left foot, but right foot. Stop it. Stop moving. There you go. So I have 2 feet now. And this one, I'm going to use the electric spline modifier to change the seed. So now I have 2 legs. So you can go get your character, your walk cycle, and all that. Oh, look at that. Rocket Lasso. That's it. Tech support live. Use a break spline modifier to split those by angle. Fantastic. So everyone follow Chris's example. So I could actually split it. But in any case, what I'm showing here is that you could use for every element of the body, you can do something from the hip to the knee to the foot, and then have another spline from the hip to the other knee to the other foot. Then from the hip to the spine, you can connect these spines as well. And you create a bunch of splines, and then you go and apply the electric modifier. What I want to try here, because I do want to create some mayhem. If you take these two objects, one thing that's not very much advertised is that in every Cinema 4D update, there's a small update to the connect object. And let's take this, put it under a null. Now I've connected these two splines. If it doesn't work, please forget the last few minutes. It works. Da, da, da. So the connect object, for anyone that doesn't know, it can connect volumes, it can connect objects, it can connect splines and all that. And it exposes from all the constituent parts a single object, and anything you put as a modifier will treat it as a single object. So this way you can create your intermediate tracers for each one of the limbs, and you can use an electric spline modifier to do what you would like to do. I have no idea if this answered any of the questions, but I find it to be fun anyway. So an electric walking character, or whatever that is. So, question by, I go by Zach. Oh, Zach. How you doing, Zach? Zach makes some absolutely stunning stuff on beta. Yeah, amazing artist. Well, I think that this update was intended in order to fix some of the problems where Chris once advised me to use the spline mask, right? Yeah, the contribution of people like Chris, besides the amazing plugins and modifiers he makes for us, is outstanding. I've learned a lot of things from him, by the way. So, yeah, even though I don't know if I answered any specific question, you can do this, and it's just different ways of creating splines, and the tracer and the connect object and all that allow you to do that. You can use MoGraph objects and so forth. So yeah, please check the link and check out Rocket Lasso's YouTube channel. It's got tons and tons of knowledge and stuff, and they make some amazing plugins as well. So where was I? I'm going to look at my list, because when I talk too much, I lose my train of thought.
Okay. I've thrown in Zach's YouTube as well. Amazing tutorials.
Yes, please check that. Now, let's move on. Let me see what I have here. Yeah, a couple of permutations of this when using Spline. So let's go to, let's close this. Let's close a few of these tabs here. Let's close this. And we have here Puffy Cloud, Matrix Lightning. We solved that. And let's check out what I've done here with Redshift. And okay, so let's assume I was checking out some references for all sorts of various lightning stuff and so forth. And sometimes we require a bit of, sort of a volumetric effect around it. Now, a lot of these effects, especially when you're doing cartoons and stuff, it's extremely handy if you do them in post. You have more control, it's faster, you have more art directability and so forth. But in the case that you really, really, and really, really want to create 3D volumetric stuff, and you can see it just works. Let me show you how you can do that, just a second. And I'm going to start with a blank scene, and I'm just going to draw a spline, and to make it look nice, I'm just going to put this in here. There you go. So what you could do is you create a volume builder. Now, when you're doing modeling with the volume builder, you use a default sign distance field. It's appropriate for creating that. But if you're doing volumetric effects like smoke and whatnot, the advice is to use fog. And you drag a spline as a child, and this creates a fog volume with the particular voxel size. Now, there are a couple of things you need to be aware of when you're using splines, any splines, by the way. And what you will see is that it works normally, no problem. You select the spline, and there are a few things here that you need to remember. Number one, the radius is how thick it's going to be. And the way the volume builder converts a spline into a volume is that it applies a number of spheres. If you make this number down, you will see it takes the points and it adds spheres based on the density. The higher the density, the closer these spheres are going to be. And then if I set this to 1, for example, it's going to be pretty uniform. And the radius and these two things allow you to create your little volume thingy that you're making. And the inside voxel fall off, if you go to the Olds University and check out my volumetric series, it's how the volume gradiates from the surface all the way down. And it becomes, let's say, smoother, so to speak, although it's not exactly smoothing. And fog smooth will also do a good job. But in any case, I'm just going to leave it as it is. And we can go and render this. And in order to render this using Redshift, I would say, let me turn this off. would be you need to go and create a material. Well, you can do a standard material, but it's easier to go to materials here. Just press and hold that plus, go down here and say volume. Apply the volume over here. And the next thing you need to do is go inside and find the volume node. And then for each of the channels that dictate how the volume is gonna look, the scattering, for example, it expects some sort of volumetric channel. If you go to the presets, you'll find volume builder. So if my volume builder was called bolt, you'll find that name here, bolt. And now that is it's going to take the data from the volume, whatever that is, that fog volume, and use it in the scattering. But you do need a light, by the way. So even if you turn it on, I don't think we're going to see anything. So add a dome light without a background, and there you have it. So the next thing you could do when you're working with volumes in general is that you can use fields to change the values of the volumes. There are a couple of things you need to be aware of. Let's say, and this is actually going to segue into, and you can use this as a volumetric, that's not it. It's lightning, it's not there. Oh, did I delete it? What did I just do? No, that's volume measure. Yeah, this is another example where I was using a Mo spline with a turtle and then this electric spline modifier. So I was just messing around where this thing just goes whoop. Yeah, it looks disgusting. It's not lightning, it's something else. It's instant stalactite, a new product I've been working on, patent pending. So instead of 10,000 years to have an inch of stalactites, you have it instantly. I mean, how cool is that? And let's see, let me find what I was trying to do here. All right, we're going to talk about this a bit later. Losing my train of thought. And if you want to change this to be a bit more, less dense and all that, there are parameters you can change within the volume node itself. And there are parameters you can change on the volume builder itself. So let's check them out slowly. The scattering coefficient, how much the light scatters within the medium, right? This is like smoke or a sponge or something like that. You can change the absorption coefficient and make it lower to make it brighter. You can change the color of this little bugger here and make it nice and make it look a bit better. But the other thing you could do is go right here and go to your fields, and let's add a random field and drag it in here. Now, when you're using fields inside the volume builder, besides the modes here, the multiply and all that, I'm going to use multiply in a second. Always make sure that the creation space, when you're using it in conjunction with actual physical objects, splines and mesh objects and so forth, is not boxed, because in order for this to work, because fields are pretty much infinite, their calculation happens everywhere there's something in the scene. This is a randomness that is sampled anywhere in the scene, 1,000 miles from the center. It doesn't make a difference. So we require a finite space for this random field to work. And the default state for fields inside the volume builder is to use a box with these dimensions and put the data in there. We don't want that. I want to change the existing data. So go down here where it says creation space and use objects below. And what this is going to do, it's going to change the values of this particular noise. And if you set this to multiply, now, wherever the value of the noise is, let's say 0, multiplying any number by 0 is 0. So it's going to create holes. And you can go now to the random field and change, let's say, its scale. I always like to use Luca. It's a fancy noise. And you can see now that these the noise is appearing here. You can add some animation, and now you have a cloudy looking thingy going on. So you can use that. The other thing you could do is you can say, well, I'm going to get a copy of this. And what I'm going to do is right click and go to, I think Ellie touched upon that. Go to the RS object and set the curve type to be something. Cylinders works nicely. And this is going to render the cylinder spline. So I can bring this forwards a bit. So you probably can see it. I'm going to make it a bit thicker. Go here and you can make it thicker. You can see it's appearing. And this is an actual object, right? Which means you can go and create a new redshift material that has some strong emission. So I don't want any of this. I don't want any of this. I want some emission here. So let me set this to, let's say, 1, make it a bluish, and apply it to my rectangle. So now we have this. And of course, then you can start all the shenanigans with cameras and lens effects and override the blooms and do that. And now you have your glow as well. But I still suggest you do all this using our great or a great red giant tools in After Effects. But nonetheless, this is a nice combination of using your electric spline, including the addition of some noise. And again, you can go here, you can say, I want it thicker and I want the values to be lower, but you already see how fancy this can be. Now let's take this concept here and let's make a cloud, because it's easy and I can talk for another 10 minutes, not saying anything I haven't said already, but I'm getting this result. So you can see the setup here. Why not go and set it up from scratch? So back to my startup layout and just create a bunch of spheres or other objects and lay them in your scene. Make this smaller. And here is my cloud, right? I am going to say something interesting. Don't worry. Just taking my time here, torturing you, moving it around, navigating. If anyone makes tutorials, don't do this when you're talking. And we're going to do this and that and the other. Don't. So let's get a volume builder now. Set it to fog. This is a standard exercise. Drag all these little buggers in here. And now we're going to go over here and smooth it, number 1. And you need to go, unfortunately, 1 by 1. And set this to, let's say, maximum voxel fall off. So we have that gradient that goes inside. You don't have to do it. Anyway, I'm not going to do it because I'm a bit too lazy. You can just set, if you select them all, you don't get those parameters. Please complain to Maxon for that. And this now is a cloud, but clouds usually are sort of flat underneath. But we're going to use the principle we used earlier, where I'm going to use a linear field, drag it in here, tell the linear field to affect the objects below, tell Mr. Linear Field over here to have a plus Y thingy, and set it to multiply. And now by moving this linear field, I can chop my cloud wherever I want it. And now it's gradiating. That's why you can see the whole thing is getting smaller, but you can always make it small and just flatten it where you want it to. And this doesn't need to be a linear field, right? You can use other fields to create secondary shapes and so forth. But this is now a cloud, right? This is it. Let's put this up here. No, actually, I'm going to put this here and increase the smoothation. That's not a real word, is it? Smoothation. All right, I'm patenting it anyway. So again, very simple. Let's make a material. Materials, go down here, volume, apply it to the volume builder. Double click. You have to go through this. Go here, find the channel. This is Cloud 8.5. So let's go and find volume builder. Cloud 8.5. We got the volume there, and we need some light. The best light is sunlight. And let's go to my redshift layout, and let's press this, and there you have it. Puffy Cloud. And again, you can add the noise on top of that and make it move. And overall, you get something like this. And you can put a floor. Just that's why it looks a bit more fancy. You just get a disk. You make it big. You raise a cloud. And you have a shadow. And you have your cartoon. Nice little puffy cloud here, which you can change its color, absorptions, and stuff like that, and make it look very, very, very fancy. So yeah, we have a bit of time, right? I'm cracking through. Let's see, what did I have over here? If there's any question, just everyone let me know. Okay, there we go. So what do I have here? Well, in this particular case, I have a single spline, don't I? Oh no, what do I have here? I forgot what I did. Spline and object destination spline and so forth. So, lightning is pointy on where it hits and thicker on the other side. And what I did here is I took a spline, a straight line here, right? And again, you can make it any way you want. And I created an Spline modifier. Then what I did, I used the Spline mode. You go to Spline mode over here, and then you go to the spline and you drag this spline in here. So now the Spline is generating a spline, and it's not showing the whole thing. Ooh, we'll fix that. I think we can fix that. Maybe, let's try something, because this should look correct. I'm going to put it under connect object. And oh, no. Okay, give me a sec. Let me see. The Spline then, as a secondary step, instead of using the Spline directly, I'm piping it into a destination spline. Now, why is that important or quasi-important? I use the word quasi a lot, don't I? I just realized that. So if you take any spline and you use a Spline, and you say, okay, Spline, spline mode, go here and drag this in here. Let's turn this invisible. Now we have a Spline over here. The Spline doesn't give you any options to use intermediate points, stuff like that. And in some very rare cases, Cinema 4D doesn't understand that this is an actual spline. The best way around that is to create a destination spline. Create any spline object, it doesn't matter what it is, and make it editable. And I'm going to call it dest for destination spline, right? Again, it doesn't matter if it has points, it doesn't have points. Might as well go and remove all the points. But you tell the Spline in the object tab to use this object as the recipient for all the spline data. There you go. So this destination spline now is a normal spline. I can't really move the points, or can I? I shouldn't be able to move the points because Spline is generating them. That is very interesting. This shouldn't be possible, but hey, who cares? Let me turn it on and off, or on and off. There you go. So that's potentially refreshing. You can use it, but I think it's a bit of a bug. But this now as a spline can be understood in every context of Cinema 4D as a spline, and will potentially allow you to do with it certain things that you can't do in other contexts. So somewhere here, I forgot what I was doing as usual today. So now we have this destination spline, which receives the data from the Spline. And the reason I did that, one of the reasons I did that is, number one, the Spline allows us to change its length. Okay. So that's pretty cool. And it allows us to change its thickness. And you can change it generally, or you can change it using this spline here. And because I can do this, then I can use that Spline with its, this is a secondary Spline that has that thickness. And I'm driving this sweep object whose thickness I'm going to use this. And the reason I'm using a second Spline is that if you use that thickness on the original Spline, it only applies the pointy bit right at the bottom. So if I grow this spline, the pointy bit is always going to be at the bottom when I reach the bottom. But if I drive another spline with it, which has different lengths, and use that in spline mode again, then the pointiness of that spline, I can turn this off, applies to, and I can show the full shape, to the endpoint, because there is no rest of the spline. I'm not animating anything here. I'm animating everything over here. So it always puts the pointy bit down there. And because this spline now is used in the sweep context, I can go and turn this off. I'm actually getting something which has always the point at the bottom. And I can animate this, and this is what was the purpose of this. So revert to save project, because I want the lightning to sort of roll out. There you go. And by combining the previous techniques of maybe this spline is generated by using a tracer and two nulls, so I can control where it strikes and where it starts from. Then I can use the electric spline to make it look cool. And then I want to change its length using a spline. And then because I want to make it pointy, I have a destination spline to receive the length of that spline. And then finally, I use this destination spline as the driver for this so that I can change the thickness. And a little straight line to make this object. This is just nothing more than sweeping a little straight line. And that way we can create some quite interesting cartoony lightning strikes. And I don't know what's going to happen if I add more of these. See, now I'm getting curious. What if I add 2, 3? See, that's going to do. I don't know what that... Oh, it works. Ha! Look at that. Oh, there's a bit of an artifact up here when the spline is 0. I think, well, fix it in post, right? That's what we do. And yeah, I think that's what I have for today. I managed to overrun by 12 minutes. What do we have? Questions? What?
I think Chad has some very cool stuff to show as well in Red Giant. We're wrapping up by showing a bit of everything.
So
but all those techniques were great. I especially love that last one. Like that looks like proper toon style lightning bolt. I like it.
Chad.
Yeah, really cool stuff. I love all this stuff. I wasn't aware of the branch spline and electric spline modifiers, and watching them in action and seeing what you guys can do with them. It's like so inspiring and really cool. I just have like 2 minutes of like very quick things to wrap up on. Can we share my screen? Is that
there?
Thanks.
We go.
So,
you are in.
So in After Effects, you know, like the traditional way of making lightning is this advanced lightning effect, which is actually, you know, really powerful. Like we can, you know, adjust the conductivity state and adjust like the forking and the direction. There's different types of lightning. You could create like a two-way strike between two different, or just like a one-way strike, or create a two-way strike if you wanted to have like two different like things that have like you know, lightning going back and forth. And there's like Omni, which is like this like really weird kind of like branching. So you can see this kind of looks very similar. It's going to go ahead and reset this. Also, if you open up, for some reason, it's in the expert settings. Don't really have to be an expert. That's a little overstating it. But if you go to termination threshold, you could animate this in kind of like a strikey kind of way. So you could see if I'm bringing that down, you kind of have like that cool lightning strikes. The downside of this, obviously, from what we've been seeing, is that this is completely 2D. We can't rotate this and have any kind of dimension. One of the things I like to do here, this glow is, you know, like a couple decades old. So it's very, it feels like it's a couple decades old. So I like to take anytime there's an effect in After Effects that's like built-in glow, even like universe effects, I typically turn it off and then I apply optical glow. It's a Red Giant effect from VFX Suite because the glow is just so much more organic and realistic, and it's just potent and great. I added a colorize color so you could get some of that color back. And most of the time, you just want to fiddle with these two settings. The amount is basically like the intensity of the glow. So we could take that down and just have like a little bit if we want to, or bring that up and have that be very, very, very bright. And the fall off is so much more organic. So this just feels like a lot more realistic of a glow. And the size is the spread. So if we just kind of like want something faint, or if we want something that's like really tight around the edges, we can do that, which is pretty cool. And sometimes you could apply optical glow twice. So you have one that's like the big faint glow overall, and then another one that's kind of like the tight glow right around the lightning bolt, which is pretty cool. But another thing that I wanted to talk about just very, very briefly, like a minute. I am here on Google Maps, intentionally on Google Maps, because you know, one of the things that Noseman said when he first took over and started talking is that like you could use this for anything. And I just wanted to like just take 30 seconds and talk a little bit about the everything that you could use this for, because you know, when you're creating a lightning bolt, you're creating a fractal, you're using fractal noise, you're making a fractal this displacement with a fractal, and fractals are in everything, everywhere, all the time. And so when Ellie first applied this electric spline modifier, it looked exactly like the Oregon coast. And that's not, I mean, it's not intentional to plan that way, but like Mother Nature just uses fractals all over the place. So it looked like a coastline. And then also when she applied the branching modifier, it looked exactly like lungs. And when you do the lightning and you set it all up, it looks exactly like a dry riverbed. And so all throughout the universe, all throughout our bodies, all throughout nature, you're seeing these like fractal shapes, these fractal patterns that are the same. So literally you can use this everywhere. We've been kind of like focusing on like lightning and like clouds and like lightning and stuff like that. But these kind of fractals are all throughout nature, and having a very quick way to create 3D renditions of something that you could then use to create lungs or capillaries or, you know, veins in the forearm. All of these things, it's used all over the place in like, you know, geography and in outer space, everything. So just keep in mind that like the stuff that we've learned today is like not just like lightning, but these amazing modifier effects for splines could be used as a base for creating, you know, all kinds of magic stuff. So that's all I wanted to say.
No, I love that. Do you know what I love? That I have to do like 7 things in the objects manager, and then you get to just go, yeah, I've got a plugin for that, lightning. And it just looks so much better. I was like,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind
great.
of like the 2D versus 3D stuff. I mean, like you're faking it so you can put it on at the end and it's like renders way faster. And it looks pretty great. And you have to do a bunch of setup, but then there's just like no flexibility. If somebody was just like, all right, now let's pan the camera around, you're like, no, I'm out, I'm done, I quit, because like you can't do anything about it.
It's like a 2D, like.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, it's a postcard in space, like this flat. Yeah. So 2D versus 3D, I think it pays to use both, to know both and understand both and use both, because they really do come in handy for different things. So yeah,
absolutely
fantastic. And it's not even 1:30 here in Quebec.
We only overrun by 18 minutes.
Yeah, only.
It's a new record, isn't it?
Let's see. Does anyone else have a question? Generally, a general comment. Vinicius Augusto comments on the stream. We check. We have multiple points of checking our stream quality. Usually, what happens, it's a local issue. Even when sometimes in my feedback, I have a feedback on 2 computers now that are connected to the internet to make sure that the signal is good and the stream is good. And sometimes, rarely, I do get a glitch on 1 or 2 of them. For anyone that wants to watch these at their own pace and go through the timestamps and all that, the videos are hosted on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. So you can watch them live on 3 channels, Maxon Training Team, and Red Giant, but the recorded ones are on the Maxon Training Team channel. So, and a lot of these techniques have actually, they have found their ways in quick tips and stuff like that. And if you generally have any questions on any new information you find, just let us know, right? We're always looking for relevant material to show on our shows, especially Ask the Trainer. We get more questions on these shows than Ask the Trainer. Come and ask your questions. We're going to stop replying to questions. Come and ask your questions. It's a dedicated hour.
You have to come live.
Yeah. But anyway, it's as far as the 2D stuff that Chad showed, it's depending on what you're doing. Please check out what our is it Universe, the Universe suite, or Red Giant in general? Red Giant tools, right? All the Red Giant tools have a ton of functionality, and if you're not requiring an absolute 3D position and things to integrate in terms of lighting and so forth with your 3D scene, do it in post. It's faster, it's more art directable, you get immediate feedback and all that, and you can play with so many other things. Try and use as many tools as possible if that saves you more time. Learn. That's what you need to do. Learn what the tools do so you can apply the best solution to each situation.
Well said.
Also, a quick reminder as well. So next Monday is the new Demystifying month. So Lionel's going to be doing compositing with AOVs, which I know is a massive topic that I get asked about a lot. And he's going to be covering that all throughout February. So yeah, definitely check that out if it's something that you want to know more about.
Yes. Okay. On that note.
Very cool, team.
Yeah. No more questions. We're good.
I think we're good.
Yeah. And thanks for the compliments, YY. I look charming no matter what I have or not on my head. I've got hair. It's the other way around. If I take this and turn it up, I've got a nice...
We just need to flip the camera.
Yeah. That's the solution. All right. Here's a question. Which one of the H, P, or B axes do I need to rotate it to get my beard on top of my head? Right. That's...
In your words, it's the third one. No matter what, it's always the third one.
Just in case anyone doesn't know, all right, a bit of trivia out there. What HPB, imagine you're an airplane. H is heading, so it's the y-axis. P is the pitch, which is down or up. So that's the x-axis. And banking is the z, because the plane banks left and right. That's the way to remember it. That's the way I remember it, and now I'm just saying it. Smarty pants.
I just
That's fantastic.
Nope. Click the next one and go, nope.
But I do that. That's what I do.
Kidding.
But it's fancy when you say it. When I'm doing it, I'm not thinking of airplanes. Yeah. But some people have a better memory than I do. Yeah.
It'd be so cool. It's like you're doing a tutorial, like, all right, adjust your banking. That would sound so like hoity-toity. Adjust your banking. I'm gonna take my banking to 12.
It's like the pinky up at the same time.
Well, I'm gonna wish everyone a great rest of the week, and hope to see you very soon on one of our other shows.
It's been a great month. Thanks for letting me be part of it, guys. It's been really cool.
Yeah, thanks for everyone watching live. It's been fun.
We should invite you in more shows.
Yes, perhaps.
Who's going to say bye-byes?
Ellie, do it.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great week, and we'll see you on a stream soon.
Yeah. Sebastian, you can ask on Ask the Trainer. Time's up.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.